I'm calling the police if you aren't off this property in 5 minutes, my sister-in-law Chloe screeched. She adjusted her designer purse resting over her heavily pregnant belly, looking down her nose at me like I was something nasty she had just stepped on. My brother Mark stood right beside her, hands casually folded in his designer jacket pockets, wearing a smug smirk that made my stomach turn. Then came my father's cold, booming voice echoing down from the top of the dark oak staircase. "Get out of here now," Chloe sneered, taking 2 deliberate steps closer so the entire living room, packed full of extended family, aunts, uncles, and cousins who had gathered for Sunday dinner, could hear every single word. "Yeah, Sarah, why not leave the whole house behind? It's not like you actually belong here anyway." The room burst into scattered, uncomfortable chuckles. My aunt nervously looked away. My cousins pulled out their phones, pretending to text while hiding amused grins. Nobody stood up for me. Nobody said a word. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't lose my temper. I simply nodded, turned around, walked upstairs, and quickly packed 2 small suitcases with my essential clothes and documents. 10 minutes later, I walked down the front steps and departed into the pouring rain. 48 hours passed before my phone rang. I picked up, pressed the speaker button, and before I could even say hello, Chloe's trembling, hyperventilating voice blasted through the speaker. "It's not true, right? Please? Please tell me you didn't send it." I sat back in my quiet coffee shop corner, took a sip of my warm drink, and let out a soft sigh. But that's not where this story began. To understand how I ended up being thrown out of my own family's home like absolute trash, you have to understand the last 3 years of my life. My mother passed away 3 years ago after a grueling, heartbreaking battle with cancer. Before she died, she took my hands in hers and asked me for one final favor: to move back into our family estate, a sprawling 6-bedroom historic home sitting on 20 acres of prime suburban land, to take care of my aging father. I gave up my rising career in corporate finance, put my personal life on pause, moved back to my hometown, and became my father's full-time caretaker, cook, driver, and accountant. My brother Mark was nowhere to be found back then. Mark was the golden child who could do no wrong in my father's eyes, despite being a chronic gambler, a failed businessman, and a man who had burned through every trust fund allowance he had ever been given. But a year ago, Mark met Chloe, a ruthless, title-obsessed social climber. The exact moment Chloe got pregnant, the two of them suddenly showed up at the estate with stacks of luggage, moving in under the guise of helping out with Dad. In reality, they treated me like unpaid household help. "Sarah, the baby's room needs to be repainted by tomorrow morning," Chloe would command on a Tuesday afternoon, sipping an iced latte while I was on my hands and knees scrubbing the foyer floor. "Sarah, why isn't dinner on the table?" "Dad needs his medication," Mark would bark from the couch, offloading every single responsibility onto my shoulders while he used Dad's primary credit card to finance his own lavish nights out. I endured it all. Day after day, week after week, I stayed calm. I never whined, I never complained, and I never let them see me sweat. They mistook my silence for weakness. They assumed I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. That was their first mistake. As the months rolled on, Chloe and Mark's cruelty escalated into something far more sinister. They began systematically isolating my father from me. They spent every evening whispering in his ear, convincing him that I was a bitter, jealous spinster who was just trying to leech off his hard-earned estate. My father, who was suffering from early-stage cognitive decline, became an easy target for their manipulation. Every time I tried to present my father with financial spreadsheets showing where his retirement savings were actually going, showing the thousands of dollars Mark was withdrawing every week, Mark would intercept the papers, tear them up, or shout over me. "She's just trying to cause drama, Dad," Mark would say loudly at the breakfast table. "She's furious that Chloe and I are giving you a grandchild and continuing the family legacy while she's accomplished nothing." Chloe took every single opportunity to embarrass me in front of company. At a family dinner celebrating the announcement of their baby's gender, Chloe raised her glass and announced to 20 relatives that I was still single, still broke, and living off her father-in-law's charity. I sat quietly at the far end of the table. I didn't defend myself. I didn't raise my voice. I just picked up my glass, took a slow sip of water, and looked Chloe dead in the eyes. Nobody in that room knew the truth. You see, everyone in the family, including Mark, Chloe, and even my father, assumed the house belonged solely to my dad. They assumed he held all the power, all the wealth, and all the deeds. They truly believed Mark and Chloe were about to inherit a real estate fortune worth millions of dollars. What they didn't know was what had actually happened during my mother's final days in hospice care. My mother was the primary beneficiary of her family's generational trust, and she, not my father, was the actual sole owner of the property. She loved my father, but she wasn't blind. She knew his financial weaknesses. She knew Mark's greedy, manipulative nature. And above all, she trusted my sharp, methodical mind. 2 days before my mother passed away, with her personal longtime attorney present in the room, she made a crucial legal move that would rewrite all our futures. Remember that detail, it matters later. The ultimate breaking point arrived on Sunday afternoon. Mark brought a heavy-set real estate developer to the house. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I overheard them talking on the back patio. We can easily tear down the north wing and put up 3 luxury townhouses. Mark was bragging, pointing across our pristine green backyard. Once we kick Sarah out and get Dad settled into a basic care home, the whole 20 acres is ours to split. Is the deed completely clear? The developer asked, chewing on a toothpick. No siblings who can block the sale? Totally clear, Mark chuckled, clinking his glass against the man's. My dad owns it outright. My sister is just a glorified live-in maid. She won't do a thing about it. She doesn't have the guts. I watched them through the kitchen window, calmly writing down every word, date, and time in my leather notebook. They thought I was helpless. They thought they had backed me into a corner where I had no choice but to surrender. They had no idea what was coming. An hour later, the rest of the extended family arrived for what Mark called a special family announcement. As everyone gathered around the grand fireplace in the foyer, Chloe stepped forward, proudly holding up a framed ultrasound picture. "We have a huge announcement," Chloe sang out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "In honor of our growing family, Mark and I are officially taking over the direct management of the estate. And to streamline things moving forward," she turned her gaze slowly toward me, her eyes burning with pure malice. "We need to clear out the unnecessary clutter." That was when my father stepped up beside her, looking at me with total indifference. "Sarah, you've been a burden here long enough. Mark is taking care of the family now. Get out of here now." And right on cue, Chloe delivered what she thought was her fatal knockout blow. Why not leave the whole house behind? The room chuckled. Mark smirked. Chloe looked triumphant, practically glowing with the thrill of public victory. They thought this was my absolute final humiliation. They thought they had stripped me of my home, my pride, and my family name in front of everyone who mattered. I didn't argue. I didn't shed a single tear. "If that's what you want," I said softly. I went upstairs, packed my bags, walked out the door, got into my car, and drove directly downtown to my attorney's office. I didn't panic. I sat down in the high-backed leather chair across from my lawyer, pulled a thick red folder from my bag, and placed it on his desk. "Send it," I said. 48 hours after they threw me out into the rain, Mark and Chloe held a lavish, catered dinner party at the estate to celebrate taking over the family property. They had invited local city officials, bankers, contractors, and our relatives to show off their grand renovation plans. Right as Mark was raising his champagne glass to make a grand speech in the middle of the dining room, the heavy front doors burst open. 2 uniformed county sheriffs walked into the foyer, followed immediately by my attorney, and 3 official process servers holding stacks of legal notices. The background music cut off sharply. Wine glasses froze in midair. The entire room went dead silent. "Mark Evans?" the lead sheriff called out, his voice booming through the house. "What is the meaning of this?" Mark stammered, his face turning bright red as he stepped forward. "This is a private dinner party. Get the hell out of my house." My attorney stepped forward, pulling a stamped, certified document from his briefcase. "It isn't your house, Mr. Evans. In fact, it isn't even your father's house." Chloe gasped, clutching her pregnant belly with one hand while adjusting her jewelry with the other. "That's impossible. The estate belongs to my father-in-law." "It did," my attorney replied smoothly, his calm voice echoing clearly across the frozen room. "Until 3 years ago. Before Mrs. Evans passed away, she executed a complete legal transfer of the house, the surrounding 20 acres, and all associated family funds directly into an irrevocable trust, naming her daughter, Sarah Evans, as the sole trustee and 100% legal owner. This is where everything changed. My attorney stepped forward and placed the certified land deed and trust documents on the dining table, right next to their expensive champagne bottles. Sarah didn't stay here as a maid, my attorney added, turning to look directly at my pale, trembling father. She stayed here out of love and grace, paying the property taxes, utility bills, and maintenance out of her own personal trust accounts, while you all treated her like dirt. The dining room erupted into instant chaos. Guests began whispering frantically. The real estate developers immediately packed up their blueprints and sprinted for the front door, realizing Mark had zero legal authority to sell even an inch of the property. Then came the final devastating blow. Furthermore, my attorney announced, as the sole owner, Miss Evans has officially filed an order of immediate eviction against Mark and Chloe Evans for unauthorized residence and fraudulent attempt of asset liquidation. Oh, and Mark, the criminal charges regarding the $80,000 you illegally withdrew from your father's intercepted accounts have been formally handed over to the district attorney's office. Chloe's smartphone slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. Mark's knees gave out, and he collapsed back into a dining chair, his face entirely drained of color. Everything they had built, their fake wealth, their high society standing, their grotesque arrogance, collapsed in a matter of seconds in front of every single person they had tried to impress. Just minutes later, as I sat in my new luxury apartment downtown, my phone rang. I picked it up, listening to Chloe's hysterical, hyperventilating sob on the line. "It's not true, right? Please, just tell me you didn't send it." I took a quiet, deeply satisfying breath, looking out at the city skyline. "I didn't just send it, Chloe," I said, my voice as smooth as ice. "It's already done. You have 24 hours to pack your trash and get out of my house." I hung up the phone before she could say another word. 3 months later, the dust finally settled. Mark was forced to liquidate every single asset he owned to pay back the stolen funds and avoid a federal prison sentence, leaving him completely broke. He and Chloe had to move into a cramped, one-bedroom basement apartment on the outskirts of town, just 2 weeks before their baby arrived. The wealthy social circle Chloe had sacrificed her dignity to impress completely abandoned them, blocking her number. My father, stripped of Mark and Chloe's toxic manipulation, finally saw the truth. I arranged for him to move into a peaceful, 5-star assisted living community, funded entirely by the trust I oversee. I visit him twice a week. He spends most of those visits crying quietly, holding my hand, and apologizing for his foolishness. As for me, I moved back into the estate. I completely renovated the entire property, tearing down the dark, heavy curtains and filling every room with light, music, and warmth. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to throw a single insult. I just stayed calm, let them play their foolish game, and watched as they walked directly into the trap they had built for themselves. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were dealing with? Tell me your story in the comments below.